Well, John Reid called for a more open debate on immigration a few days ago. However, we were told no minister would come on and engage in that debate in advance of his speech. However, I am joined by the former Home Office Minister, Fiona McTaggart, the Director of the Institute of Public Policy Research, Nick Pearce, the columnist Polly Toynbee, and from Plymouth by Nigel Farage from the UK Independence Party. Fiona McTaggart, the government seriously underestimated its numbers, didn't it? How did that go badly wrong? Was it a bad mistake or a deliberate deception?
There's certainly no question that the government deliberately set out to deceive. I think that it's quite interesting if you look at the series of reports that you revealed there from the Polish embassy. I think there was probably a change happening over time. That one of the things that happens in migration is people do it and then they send messages back to their family overseas. They say, you can do well here, come along, and actually things change as they're occurring. And in fact, the consequences of the migration, while it's quite right to say that in individual communities like Slough, the town I represent, the inadequacy of the government counting system has had really unfair consequences. But nevertheless, it's a prosperous town, which has always been a town of migrants since actually the First World War. And that migration, those different migrations, whether it's come from Poland, from the Punjab, from the Caribbean, and now from Poland again, they've all actually contributed to the diversity and the economic success that Slough brings to Britain.
Nigel Farage, this has done our economy no end of good, realistically, hasn't it?
Well, unemployment is up by 225,000 people over the course of the last year and 90,000 in the last quarter alone. I was opposed to the Eastern European countries joining the EU on the basis they joined back in 2004. And Fiona McTaggart to say that it was impossible to predict. Goodness me, we were able to predict that at least 250,000 would come, and we've been proved right. And frankly, we cannot go on like this. This is not like previous migrations. This is massive, absolutely massive in scale. And once these people have worked here for a year, they're then entitled to social security. They're then entitled to bring their whole families over. So the 500,000 plus that have come since 2004 may prove to be the tip of the iceberg. And it's about time this government got a grip.
Nick Pearce, you think this is a very different model of migration to anything we've seen before?
Well, it's different to the degree that people are coming from the rest of the European Union. And we signed up to the European Union and we have allowed access to our labour markets. And other countries are also doing so now. And it's a question not of whether people are allowed to move around the European Union and work, but when they do so. And, you know, Brits go and live in Spain, they go and live in France. People like Nigel don't want us to be in the European Union, so it's a convenient stick to beat the European Union.
We put ourselves up first, didn't we? We opened ourselves to this, along with Ireland, along with Sweden, in a way that none of the other European countries did. Was that a mistake?
No, I don't think it was. I mean, I think you have to remember that, you know, when we talk about the impact on local services, it's certainly true that the numbers are underestimated and local councils will always ask the government for more money. That's true. But in my area, where I live in Lambeth, it's migrants who clean my bins and sweep the streets. They're providing the service, not using it. And we need to remember that Poles working in London and across the country are benefiting us. They're allowing our economy to grow, and they haven't caused unemployment. There may be some impact on wages, but they have not caused unemployment.
Have we stretched our public services, Polly Toynbee? Is this gone too far and doesn't need a limit?
The real question is, who has it helped? We live in such an unequal society that it's helped the well-off. It means that we can all get our services paid for much more cheaply. People can hire people more cheaply, they can get their bins done more cheaply, but at the expense of people whose wages would normally have risen. I think it's been extraordinary that in a boom time of the last few years, wages at the bottom have really been pegged down. And there's been a lot, the government has congratulated itself and said, wonderful, we have this great flexible labour market, isn't it fantastic? We haven't had wage inflation. The reason we haven't had increasing wages at the bottom is purely because of the level of migration.
So actually,
that, you know, the rich do well, but
with Nigel Farage in this one. I mean, we have seen levels of unemployment rise, and we have seen the poor suffer from this.
I think we have. I think we have seen the low-paid, the minimum wage stay very low, and the low-paid, the ones who suffer. And it's the well-off who can eat in a restaurant where they know that the dishes are washed by somebody who is being paid a sub-survivable wage. If you didn't have that influx, the wages would rise, and this prevents that happening. It prevents the normal workings of the market. It also prevents as much pressure on training people up. We have a lot of people in this country who are undertrained, and if you didn't have this huge influx of people, I think the government, and particularly employers are very keen on them. You know, CBI, Chambers of Commerce, very keen on this cheap labour force. If you didn't have that, they would all have to pull together and do a lot more about skills and education.
Fiona McTaggart, it's extraordinary when even Polly Toynbee is taking that line, when she hears the danger that this has done. Doesn't it make you rethink?
No, Polly's actually right about what she's saying about the pressure on wages and the way in which it enables poor employers to kind of get a free pass. And actually, the role here for government has to be to do some of the things that we have done. To put in place a minimum wage, there's a very strong argument to increase that. To put in place better support for training and for skills. To actually make sure that when we're managing that migration which we can manage, which doesn't include the migration we signed up to in 1973 when we joined the European Union, that we agreed at that point to free movement of labour. The timing of this was a separate choice. Let's just talk about that.
Can you manage the migration that's happening at the moment? Because judging from
those
emails, it didn't seem that you could. And John Reid is now talking about the need for an optimum limit.
No,
do you need one?
You can't manage down migration from the EU. Because actually part of the deal in the EU, part of the reason why it is strong and sustains successful economies is that we have free movement of labour. In a world where you've got free movement of capital, free movement of labour, labour is going to wish to move. We can manage migration from elsewhere than the EU. Actually, we do that. We do that. Now, of course you're talking about limits. Completely free movement. Nobody's ever argued for that. And the bit of your package which implied that there was serious party divides on migration policy in history actually is ahistorical in that both parties historically have been against primary migration.
Just clarify for me, are we expecting a limit from John Reid set now?
I don't think that John Reid is going to fish out arbitrary numbers. I think that would be foolish, it wouldn't work, and it wouldn't fit our economy. What I think he might say is that we need to be clear about where the gaps in our economy are, about where the skills that we need are. And, for example, choices that we rightly ought to make. Should we be taking doctors from South Africa? I don't think we should. South Africa needs them more than Britain, and we ought to make clear choices and decisions about that. And that's the kind of debate that we ought properly to be having about migration. It's a proper subject to be discussed. It's a proper issue of public policy.